So here again, I have written a system of equations. So U vector belongs to Rp. So its U vector has P components, U1, U2 up to Up, and your A matrix is a P cross P constant matrix. All the elements of this matrix A are constants. I'm using double bars for matrices and single vector notation for vectors. So you have some equation, like some system of equations like this. So now this is a linear hyperbolic 1D system because I've not added summation here and I've not taken j equals 1 2D. It's just 1D. So this is just a 1D system with constant coefficients. Constant coefficients mean the matrix A has constant elements. So now this is your system under consideration. I'm giving it formally first, and then I'll treat it less formally next. So and then we'll go on to seeing the Riemann problem, which comes as an example for this system. So now we say that this system of equations is strictly hyperbolic, which means that this matrix A has p distinct real eigenvalues. Like this is a p cross p matrix, and it will obviously have p eigenvalues. When we say that it's strictly hyperbolic, we say that its eigenvalues are all distinct. No two of the eigenvalues are equal. All of them are distinct from each other. So, so since they are distinct, we can arrange the eigenvalues in some order, either in an increasing order or decreasing order. We know they are like it must be possible for us to write those p eigenvalues as something like this. And we are just saying that lambda 1 is less than lambda 2, less than up to lambda p. We are just writing in an increasing order. And now each of these eigenvalue will be associated with some eigenvector. We have so-called right eigenvector and left eigenvector. So right eigenvector is something that satisfies this equation, that is a matrix into matrix multiplied by the right eigenvector on the right side equals some that eigenvalue and eigenvector. Here the left eigenvector gets multiplied to the left of the matrix. So we do LK transpose. Like here it's just RK. Here RK will be something like this. This is a P cross P matrix, and this is P cross 1 vector. Here this is going to be 1 cross P and P cross P. Okay, so this way LK vector is the left eigenvector of the matrix A. Um, if something is a left eigenvector of A, we can also note that this is some extra thing to notice. LK is the right eigenvector of A vector transpose, A matrix transpose. So just if we try to transpose this equation, we'll have something like this. So now your LK vector is a right eigenvector for the matrix A transpose. So the left eigenvector of matrix A becomes the right eigenvector of the matrix A transpose. So this is just something to notice. We won't be actually using it here. However, we'll be using some good properties of the left and right eigenvectors. Uh, since the eigenvalues are all distinct, your eigenvectors are all going to be linearly independent. That is, you'll have p right eigenvectors, right? Your k runs from 1 to p. like Rk are eigenvectors where k runs from 1 up to p. So you'll have p right eigenvectors, and similarly you'll have p left eigenvectors. So and all of these p right eigenvectors are linearly independent. So you have p vectors that are linearly independent. So when you have such p vectors that are linearly independent, they'll obviously form a basis for the space Rp. That is, from those linearly independent p eigenvectors, you can any linear combination of these p linearly independent eigenvectors will give you the whole space Rp. Like any vector in the space Rp can be obtained as a linear combination of just these p eigenvectors. Like, have you heard of this, or is this completely new?
Man, we have heard of like eigenvalues and vectors, but it was like with respect to the basic matrices. Like uh, it's been a while, but we'll have to refresh it again.
Okay. Yeah, I'll introduce something from linear algebra. You have something known as linearly independent set and bases and all, spanning set. Like when you say just these matrices, like I'm doing it in just 2D, okay? So from these two vectors, is it possible for you to get all the vectors in the space Rp, R2 by just doing some possible any linear combination? Let's say you have some A into 1 0 plus B into 0 1. Now this is some linear combination, right, of these two vectors. So now with these two vectors, can you get all possible vectors in R2?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Yeah. So now these two are linearly independent as well, which means that you know from this, when can you get something like this? Like from this system, what values of A and B will give you something like a zero vector? What?
A and B have to be zero.
Yeah, only this possibility can lead you to having A and B, lead you to having a zero vector. No other values for A and B can give you zero vector. So this means that these two vectors are linearly independent. So suppose all the time when A and B are zero, you will always get zero vector. But that should be the only possibility. Like no other values for A and B. Like say plus 1 here and minus 1 here cannot lead can should not lead you to having a zero vector as the result. Like there can be some other case also. Like if you have some 1 1 and 2 2 as vectors. Now a plus b equals 0 0. Now in this case, along with a and b being 0, you can have something like a equals minus 2 and b equals 1. This can also lead you to having 0 vector. Similarly, you can have many possible values for a and b here. So now these vectors are not linearly independent. They are linearly dependent. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is what this is what you say when two vectors being it's not just two vectors. You can have many vectors like this here now. Like instead of just R2, you can go to any dimension, R3 or 4, anything. So that way you'll have many coefficients A, B, C, D, etc. So all of them, all your A, B, C, D should be equal to 0. I mean that should be the only possibility for you to get 0 vector. So in that case, you say that all of your 4 vectors are linearly independent. Otherwise, your vectors are linearly dependent. So now that is what a linearly independent set is. From you just take few vectors and put them in a set, and when those vectors are linearly independent, you call that set as a linearly independent set. Now, a spanning set is something that using just those two vectors. Now I told you initially I told you, right, just with 1 0 and 0 1, it is possible for you to get all vectors in R2, like any linear combination of A and B. Like now forget about this equal to 0 thing. Like any linear combination, like put any value for a this is known as linear combination of vectors 1 0 and 0 1. So now you have you just with this linear combination, just by plugging in different values for A and B, you can obtain all the values in the space R2, all the vectors in the space R2. So you can't do this with just having 1 0. Now this cannot span the whole different for this vector 1 0. Just by plugging in different values of A, you cannot obtain the whole set R2. You need two vectors. So similarly, not just these two vectors, like you can have different set of two vectors. Now let me just say into 0 1. Now with this, can you get all elements in R2? With this set, with these two vectors, can you get all elements in R2, all vectors in R2?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now
No, no,
R2,
no. Oh, yeah. We can.
we can get all elements, like because we'll have this will be equal to a plus b. So now a can belong to any real, a can be any real number. So yes, you're getting, you can get all elements. Now b also can be any real number. So now that way you get all elements in R2. And now yes, are these two vectors linearly independent? I mean, if you put equal to 0 here, a 0 vector here, is A and B being 0 the only possibility, or are there other possibilities too for having a 0 vector?
A and B being 0 is the only possibility.
Yeah. So these are linearly independent as well, and they can they can from these two vectors you can have whole R2. So a spanning set is something like when you have a set, you just take some vectors and put them in a set. Now from those vectors should be able to give you the whole R2 or R3 or R4, whatever the space is. So in that case, you say that this set spans R2. That is your, let's call this as some set. So now this set spans R2. Similarly, this set also 1 1 and 1 0. This also spans R2. So that is what is known as spanning set. So this is what is a linearly independent set and a spanning set. Now, when a linearly independent set, when a set is both linearly independent and it can span the whole space, then we call it as a basis for R2 or R3, whatever. So now your 1 0 0 1 is a basis for R2. 1 1 and 0 1 is a basis for R2. 1 1 1 0 is a basis for R2. Like this set, like to these sets, if you add just one more element, if like along, like let me say I'm adding one more element to it, call it 1 1. Now these three vectors together, will they be linearly independent? I mean, okay, now let's see. will is there, I mean, will A equal B equal C equal 0? Is this the only possibility for getting 0 vector, or are there many other possibilities as well? Do we have other possibilities for A, B and C to get 0 vector?
Yes, ma'am. We have other possibilities.
So now this set becomes linearly dependent. That is, they are not linearly independent anymore. So this is the smallest set. For R2, just you having just two vectors that are linearly independent is only possible. To those two vectors, if you add some other vector, I mean 1 1 of course with 0 1 formed a linearly independent set. However, if you added 1 1 to this set, it became linearly dependent. So the minimum possible number of vectors that you can have for R2 is 2. I mean, minimum possible linearly independent vectors that you can have is 2. So your base or that is known as dimension for R2. I mean the dimension for basis. These two vectors can now be linearly independent, and they can also span R2. So that way they form a basis for R2. And all of these are basis for R2. And all the basis sets will have the same number of vectors in them. That is, all if you look at it, all of them have just two vectors. All the basis sets, all of these three sets have two vectors. You can have more such sets like this, but all of them will have only two vectors, and this is known as basis for R2. So this 2 is now the dimension for R2. So this is some small peek into linear algebra. So you have some linearly independent set, then basis set, then spanning set. So now on to our top content. Like, is it clear?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now strict hyperbolicity actually means that you have p distinct real eigenvalues. That is, if you for a p cross p matrix, you have p distinct eigenvalues, and you were able to arrange them in some order. Now, when we already talked about hyperbolicity, right? Hyperbolicity is when you call a system to be hyperbolic when the matrix A has linearly independent eigenvectors. Now we talked what linearly independent is all about. So you have all your p eigenvectors are going to be linearly independent for hyperbolicity condition. And strict hyperbolicity actually means you have p distinct real eigenvalues, and there's a proof that when your eigenvalues are distinct, that is two distinct eigenvalues will always have linearly independent eigenvectors. I mean, the eigenvectors corresponding to any two distinct eigenvalues will be linearly independent. So when you say that your eigenvalues are distinct, you actually infer out of this that your eigenvectors corresponding to each of these p eigenvalues are going to be linearly independent. So that's what is the condition for strict hyperbolicity. If it's not just, if it, let's say if it's not strict, if it's only hyperbolic, then your eigenvalues need not be distinct. However, your eigenvectors are all linearly independent. That is, I only told that eigenvectors corresponding to distinct eigenvalues are linearly independent. I did not say that eigenvector, I mean, for all linearly independent eigenvectors, the eigenvalues corresponding to them need not all be distinct. They can be same as well. So you're only from this you can only infer that your eigenvectors are all linearly independent. But even without this condition, you can have your eigenvectors to be linearly independent. So that is what is just normal hyperbolicity is. Strict hyperbolicity is just making sure perfectly that your eigenvectors are linearly independent just by saying that your eigenvalues are distinct. So because of this distinctness, we are able to write them in some order, and we got the right eigenvector set and left eigenvector set. So now you have p such eigenvectors and all of them are linearly independent. So now when they are for Rp, your basis also has to be of p dimension, right? There have it mean p number of linearly independent vectors will form a basis for Rp. That is, with p linearly independent eigenvectors, you can always any linear combination of these p linearly independent eigenvectors will always give you the whole space Rp. So that is what we talked, right, when we talked about basis. So just with any linear combination of just these p linearly independent eigenvectors will give you the whole space Rp. So now that is what it means. Eigenvectors of both, like, just arrange these. You have eigenvectors. All of these are vectors. Okay. Now this set will help you get a basis for Rp. This set is a basis for Rp. That is, from this set of p vectors, you will be able to obtain all the elements in Rp. Similarly, from this set of p vectors, Lp, left eigenvectors, this will also form a basis for Rp. These are also linearly independent. So that is what this statement means. And also, you take two different, you take L2 you take dot product of two of these vectors, like L2 transpose into R2, you will get 1. But if you take L2 transpose with R1, you will get 0. They're all orthogonal in orthonormal impact. So if you just, when j is not equal to k, like delta jk is something Dirac delta function. It's known as the Dirac delta function. So it's equal to 1 when j equals k, and it's equal to 0 when j is not equal to k. So this is known as the Dirac delta function. You will encounter this often in cases.
Ma'am, it's also even Kronecker delta function acts like that, right?
Yeah. Okay, this is Kronecker delta function, sorry. Dirac delta function is something different. You
I
have
think it goes to infinity, no, ma'am. Dirac delta.
yeah,
Yeah.
Dirac delta function is something that is 1 in at just one specific point and 0 at all other points.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, Dirac's delta function is different. So this is Kronecker delta. So yeah. Yes. So yeah, you know this, right? Then now because of this property that we have, it's possible for us to write something like this. That is, you just do a dot product of eigenvector with the conserved variable vector. Like both of them are have p components. Like there are p components in each of these vectors. So just take a dot product and you'll get some scalar value. That will be alpha k. And your u vector k, when you can be expressed as something like this. Now, if you let's just write it as alpha. let me just expand it. So to this, if I, this is now u vector. Like suppose that this is u vector. Now to this, if I just add pre-multiply, I mean do dot product of some LK vector. Let me say I am doing L1 vector, dot product L1. We do dot product with everything. This is scalar. Actually, you're doing dot product with R2, okay? So now this will lead to alpha 1 into 1, whereas all others will lead to alpha 2 into 0. This will give you alpha p into 0. So all of these will lead to having 0, and you'll only end up having alpha 1. So your L dot u is alpha 1. So this is something that you took initially. Alpha k is Lk dot u. So since you define alpha k as something like this, it's okay for you to write u vector as summation of all the components. I mean Rk vectors. I mean it's actually a linear combination of Rk vectors. So with this, you do any dot product of you do a dot product with Lk vector, you will get alpha k. I mean to this u expression for u vector, you do dot product with Lk vector, you get alpha k as the output. So it's possible for you to write because of this property, that is this one, it's possible for you to write u vector as just summation of Rk vectors. Now your system, this is your system of conservation law that you took initially. So to that you just do some you just do dot product of this system with the Lk vector. So that becomes Lk transpose into U. So now Lk transpose into A vector is lambda k Lk transpose. This is because Lk is an eigenvector for the matrix A. So you get eigenvalue corresponding to that eigenvector and eigenvector itself. So now you take Lk transpose inside this and do dot product, you get alpha k. So now this whole system, that is, this is a vector equation, has now transformed into a scalar equation because of this dot product. And if you notice this is just a linear convection equation which we have studied earlier. Okay, this is simply like I think we have studied something like dou by dou t u plus c dou by dou x u equals 0 maybe. This is just a linear convection equation because you have some constant over here. Here we have lambda k as our constant, and your equation is in term, this is a scalar conservation law for alpha k, and your flux is lambda k alpha k, and since lambda k is a constant, you have a linear convection equation. So basically, you do dot product with any dot product of this system with any Lk vector, you get a linear convection equation in alpha k corresponding to that Lk. So you actually can put L1 vector dot L2 vector dot product up to Lp vector dot product. You will obtain similar equations in alpha 1, alpha 2 up to alpha p. So basically this a system of p equations has been transformed into just p linear convection equations. This whole system of equations, it's basically a system of p equations has been split up into p scalar equations. So I think I've written the same thing here. So that's your first initial system that you took is now equivalent to p independent scalar first order equations. Now we have seen how to solve this linear convection equation. So let's say you have some, now let's see how to solve a problem. I mean, how to solve a system of equations by using the solution for simple linear convection equation. So now let's say you have some problem like this. This is your PDE, system of PDEs. And this is your initial condition. U vector of x comma 0, this 0 corresponds to t equals 0. You have some function, some vector u naught vector of x. So now we have transformed this system, I mean we have split this system into p scalar equations, linear convection equations. Now we need to break this initial condition into p initial conditions that go with these p scalar equations. So now do a similar dot product, I mean to this equation, to this initial condition. Let's just do some dot product, lk dot u vector of x comma 0, which will become lk dot u naught of x. This is actually your initial condition for this for each of these p scalar equations. This will be alpha k naught of x. Okay, some alpha k naught, some scalar value, scalar function dependent on just x. Okay, so this will now be your initial condition for each of your scalar equations. So that's what we are doing, setting alpha k naught of x as lk transpose u naught of x. As this becomes your initial value for your p scalar equations. Now yes, this is the solution. If we have seen it, I'll okay. I mean, do you guys remember how we solved this linear convection equation earlier? So we actually just compared. This was actually, yeah.
Ma'am, we compared it with Burgess equation.
Yeah, we compared this with this. This is our linear convection equation. We compared it with some standard equation, which is not Burgess equation, but it's something d by dt alpha k, right? Equals dou by dou t alpha k plus dou by dou x alpha k into dx by dt. Remember doing this? So now we can compare these two equations. So that we have d by dt alpha k equals 0 along dx by dt equals lambda k. Remember doing such thing? Like whatever the system is, you actually when you have some equation of this form, you just write a total derivative of alpha k with respect to t. This is that, right? This is a total derivative of alpha k with respect to t. So this is partial derivative of alpha k with respect to t, and this is partial derivative of alpha k with respect to x, and here we have differentiated x with respect to time. So now we compare these two equations. You have dou by dou t alpha k, same, dou by dou x alpha k, same here. So these two equations are equal if d by dt alpha k equals 0 along lambda k equals dx by dt. So along this specific line you have d by dt alpha k equals 0. So this is in method of, this is method of characteristics. We identify the characteristics, and along that characteristics we say that the solution is of some form, isn't it? So along this line now x equals lambda kt plus some constant say x naught, along such line you have alpha k to be constant, that is you know, okay. So let me first explain you with some specific example. Let's go to the Riemann problem. So yes, the only difference is the initial condition here. So I have taken the initial condition to be of some specific form. It is to the left of x equals 0, you have your u naught vector of x as ul vector, and to the right of x equals 0, you have your initial condition as ur vector. So I've told you initial condition is of some form, right? At each and every x, your initial condition will be some constant vector. So initial condition u naught vector of x is a function of x. So now, yes. Let's say this is your x less than 0 at time t equals 0. Here your u is ul, and to the right of x equals 0, your u is ur. We are just fixing this as the initial condition. Initial condition can be anything. At each and every x, you can have different values for u. So that is what we dealt with previously in a general case. Now we are just fixing u to be ul on one side of x and x equals 0, and on the other side of x equals 0, we fix u to be ur. So similarly, we define alpha kl and alpha kr. So we told, right, u vector is a summation of alpha k rk vector. So we saw this in the theory some time back. So now each of these will be each of these, that is ul vector and ur vector, can be written as some alpha kl and some alpha kr. I told you Rk vectors are all linearly independent eigenvectors. So any vector in Rp can be obtained as some linear combination of these Rk vectors. So it's always possible for you to write any vector. That is UL vector lies in Rp now. So Rk vector also lie in Rp, and each of these, that is R1 up to Rp, all of these are linearly independent, and it's always possible, and they span the whole set Rp. So they form Rp vectors form a basis for Rp. So it's always possible for us to write any vector in Rp as a linear combination of just these P Rk vectors. So we are writing it as some alpha kl or some constants a, b, c, d, which we saw earlier. Okay. So ul can be written as some, now your ul vector is some alpha 1l r1 vector plus alpha 2l r2 vector, and so on. There's alpha pl r3 vector. So this is your ul vector now. Similarly, ur vector can also be written as alpha 1 r1 vector plus, and so on. So you're actually just writing these. Is it clear? Any doubts? Any doubts?
Oh, no.
Okay. So yes, we just write this. Okay. Next, we already saw that we split this system into p scalar equations, and now this initial condition for this system has also been split up into p initial conditions for each of the scalar equations. That is, we have these constants, right? Alpha kl and alpha kr. So now for these scalar equations, we write the initial condition as something like this. That is, towards the left of 0, alpha k will take the value alpha kl, and to the right of 0 we have alpha kr. This in fact has been, this picture in fact has been done for the scalar case, a single scalar system. I mean, I'm not writing, this picture is not for the whole system, it's for the single scalar system, scalar equation. That is, it is for this scalar equation, that is one scalar equation. I'll better write it as alpha KL and this is alpha KR. Okay, so now towards the left of x equals 0, you have alpha KL as the initial condition, and towards the right of x equals 0, you have alpha KR. Similarly, you will have it for all p equations. I've shown it for some general k, but k runs from 1 to p. So you have p such equations and p such initial conditions. So now to find the solution for such a system, you just take another equation like this. This is total derivative of alpha k with respect to t. So this is written as d. Now we compare 1 and 2. Is this comparison clear? Is there any doubt with this comparison? I think we have done it before.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So out of this comparison, you get this d alpha k by dt equals 0 along this specific line. So now x equals lambda kt plus some constant x naught. So in this line x, this is your x axis, right? And this is at t equals 0. So here you have different values for x, infinite number of values for x, and each of your x naught now can be anything. That is, let's say you're starting, let's say this is your x naught now. Now this line is actually, this line is an equation for this line. But for a different x naught, say this one, this represents this, this equation that now represents an equation for this line, now is an equation for this line. So for each of these x naughts, this equation represents a general equation for some general x naught. So since your slope is all same for all this, for all x naughts, you have slanting lines with some specific slope lambda, dx by dt equals lambda k. So slope is 1 by lambda k. So you have constant slope lines passing through all x naughts here. So this is just a representative picture. This actually is continuous, okay? You have another line at this location as well. Let's say you have another line x equals lambda k t plus x naught at this location as well. So it's just very close and continuous. It's just a representative discrete picture here. So you have such a plane, and you have such lines passing through each and every point in the x-axis. So and along each of these lines, your alpha k remains constant. So if you have you have alpha k defined at this line, defined on this line, that is at t equals 0 on the x-axis, you have your alpha k is defined. So if at x naught you have some alpha k, that alpha k will remain the same. That will remain the same on this line. That is for this ODE, this is the solution. So alpha k will remain constant along this whole line. So along each of these lines, whatever the initial condition was, that will prevail for all times. So along this line, your solution will remain constant. That is, which means that you have some kind of a traveling wave. So basically, our initial condition has been split up into something between x equals something. I mean, our initial condition was actually split up at x equals 0. That is, towards the left of x equals 0, you had something, and towards the right, you had something else. So now, this is that line. This is that line which passes through x equals 0, and in this region your alpha k is all same, because along each and every line your alpha k is going to remain constant, and here in the whole x-axis towards the left of x equals 0, your alpha k is same. So in this region your alpha k will remain constant, whereas in this region your alpha k will remain constant. That is, here you'll have alpha k equals alpha kl, and here towards the right you'll have alpha k equals alpha kr, and that splitting line is x equals lambda kt plus 0. So towards x less than lambda kt, you have alpha k equals alpha kl, and for x greater than lambda kt, you have alpha k equals alpha kr. So this is now the solution for this scalar equation. So for each of these scalar equations, you'll have p such solutions. You have p scalar equations, and you'll have p such solutions. And you are splitting at x equals 0, right? So at x equals 0, you are drawing this line. So this is for dx by dt equals lambda k. Now for p such equations, you are drawing p different characteristics at x equals 0 alone. I'm not drawing the other characteristics over here. The left and right characteristics are not drawn over here. Just the one characteristic that passes through x equals 0, I've drawn it over here. Similarly, for p such equations, you can have p such diagrams. And from all those pictures, I'm just taking the line that passes through x equals 0 alone, and I'm plotting those lines here. So we have p such lines passing through x equals 0. And each of these have slope x by t equals some different lambda. I told you they are all distinct. Lambda 1 is less than lambda 2 less than, we have ordered, right? So now because of that, we are able to have p such characteristics passing through x naught. And now this single characteristic here, this single line divided the solution. That is, here to the left of this line we had alpha k equals alpha kl, and to the right of this we had alpha k equals alpha kr. Similarly, for each of these, to the left of this line, your alpha 1 will be, in this region you have alpha 1 equals alpha 1l, whereas in this region, this whole region, you'll have alpha 1 equals alpha r. Similarly, here alpha 2 will be alpha 2l, here alpha 2 will be alpha 2r. It goes on like this. You have different solutions for each of these equations. Similar, like this is your solution, and we have told that the solution overlapping of these solutions, that is sum of linear combination of each of these solutions will become the full solution for u. That is, u vector is summation k equals 1 to p alpha k r k vector. So now you, at each and every point in this xt plane, you have alpha k's defined. That is, for each of your, you have alpha 1, alpha 2 up to alpha p is defined at every point in this plane. That is for all xt, because we obtained the solution, right, to be of this form. So we know what the solution is, and the solution is of this form. So just summation of all of those will give us u vector. That is the solution for the main problem that we consider. So yes. Now let's just consider this first characteristic x by t equals lambda 1. For this characteristic, here for this characteristic, your alpha 1 is alpha 1L, right? Whereas everything is alpha 1L. Like this region, this whole region is to the left for each of these characteristics. For all of the characteristics, this point, I mean any point in this region will fall to the left for each of the P characteristic. Is that clear? Any doubts? Any doubts?
No.
Okay. So in this region, all of your values will be just L only. Whereas if you look at this, any point in this region, you have alpha 1 as alpha 1 R, like unlike L here, you have R, whereas all others will be L only. If you look at this point, everything will be R except last one. Whereas for this point, everything will be R. All P values will have R only. So this is how you have the solutions defined. So now when you do summation of all these, you get your main solution U vector. Just for a change, we have written Wm vector, and U vectors are represented as W vectors here. So the same summation has been just split up into the one corresponding to R and one corresponding to L. So now if let's say you are looking at some M lies between 0 to P. So this region is W naught. So this is your W naught region. So in this region, everything is L, right? So that this expression works fine. So your M is 0. So this doesn't have any role, and this will be when your M is 0, this will run from K equals 1 to P. So only this summation will have a role. That works fine. All of these are L only. Alpha KL are K vectors. Whereas when you look at W1, you have just the first one alone is R, and whereas the rest of the things are L. So when you substitute M equals 1 here, this will have a role, that is M equals 1. So this runs from just 1 to 1. So you have just alpha K1 RK vector, I mean alpha 1 R RK vector, plus and this runs from 2 to P. So similarly, this expression works fine for each and everything that I've written here. So summation of all of these things is actually written as this expression, a general expression. So now the solution U vector of x comma t can now be written as something like this. That is towards x by t less than 1, that is in this region. This is x by t equals lambda 1. So for x by t less than lambda 1, this is the region. You have W naught as the solution, which is just UL vector. Because W naught is just summation of these things into R, summation of these things with RK vectors accordingly. Okay, all of these are L. So this was what our UL was. So W naught is UL. And W1 is this region between x by t less, that lies between lambda 1, I mean your x by t now lies between lambda 1 and lambda 2. Lambda 1 and lambda 2. So this is your region now. In this region, your solution is W1, which is the summation of these things, and each of these things will be multiplied by R1 vectors correspondingly, okay? Like multiply each of these with these vectors, add them, and then this becomes your solution in this region. Similarly, for you mark the regions based on this expression. That is, you know what the equation for the characteristics is. It's x by t equals some lambda. So between two characteristics, you mark your region x by t. So now your x by t lies between two different lambda, and between those two characteristics, you have some solution. So this is what your solution is for the Riemann problem. So this is just to show that how a system can be transformed into some scalar equations, and how the solutions for the scalar equations again get transformed into solution for the whole system of equations. Any doubts here?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So now this has been done quite formally. I'll show a less formal way of doing this. Okay. So we are again considering the same system of equations. U vector belongs to Rp, that is we have P components for U vector, the same system. A matrix is a constant, P cross P constant matrix. So we just consider the same system that we initially considered, okay? So now let's just take this eigenvalue problem, like determinant of a vector a matrix minus lambda I equals 0. When we do solve that, we get p eigenvalues. This is the usual eigenvalue problem, and we solve it to get the eigenvalues and corresponding eigenvectors. We call those now, yeah, the notation is different now. It's capital R instead of small r. So we have p eigenvectors. All of them are right eigenvectors, and you arrange those eigenvectors as the columns of a matrix. That is, first column is the first eigenvector, second column is the second eigenvector. So this is a capital R matrix. So now to this matrix, yeah, if you do no, if you do R inverse AR, you will get some diagonal matrix, and that diagonal matrix will have the eigenvalues as its diagonal elements. So this is your. Have you come across such a kind of a decomposition? This is eigenvalue decomposition.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. So yes. Similarly, you get to write A also as this form. Now, yes, your U vector now can be written as some R inverse into U. That is the matrix. Inverse of this right eigenvectors when put together and taken inverse, you get some matrix, right? This actually is the rows of R inverse are left eigenvectors actually. But let's not go into that. Rows of R inverse are actually left eigenvectors of A. So yeah, now you get to write U vector as R into W vector. So now in this system that you had, you can just write U as R into W vector. And since R is a constant matrix, because your A is a constant matrix, your eigenvectors are also going to be constants, and eigenvalues are also going to be constants. So your eigenvector matrix R matrix will be a constant matrix. So it won't be a function of x. So you can take it out. So it will come here, and then you can just remove this by taking an R inverse. So yeah, you have something like this, and this becomes your diagonal matrix. So now this is a simple decomposition. You have W's here. This is a vector equation. Your actual system of equations has now been transformed into another system of equations. But if you expand and write this system, you will actually find p scalar equations from because this matrix is a diagonal matrix. Okay, you can write just dou by dou t w1 plus lambda 1 dou w1 by dou x equals 0 as one equation. From this you can actually obtain p scalar equations. Initially we had a system, and because of this eigenvalue decomposition we were able to decompose that system into p different scalar equations. Now similarly we can solve these each of these equations separately, and we can find the solution for the whole systems, means the whole system in terms of u vector. We can find w1, w2, etc. like solution at all x and t. We can find those from each of these systems, and yes, we can arrange that as a vector again, w1, w2 up to wp. Now from this we can find u vector, that is u vector equals r into w vector, right? So from this we can find the solution for the system. This is another less formal, easy way. Yeah. Here we don't consider the left eigenvectors at all. But yes, when you take R inverse, you actually get left eigenvectors of A. Like, yes, this is both are equivalent. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Is it clear?
Ma'am, could you summarize it once?
Huh?
Can you summarize the method once?
Summarize. Okay. This alone or from the beginning?
Like, yeah, from here only, ma'am.
Huh?
From the equation, yeah, from the beginning.
Okay. So yes, you consider some linear hyperbolic 1D system. We are only talking about 1D system. That is, we don't have multiple dimensions, just one dimension. Uh, when we say that the system is linear and hyperbolic, uh, here your constant, your A matrix that is over here is not a function of u. That way it becomes a linear system. Okay. So it's A matrix is not a function of u. So it's a constant matrix. So it's a linear system. The first word. Hyperbolic, when it's hyperbolic, you get linearly independent eigenvectors for this matrix A. Okay. And also, yes, I've told you R inverse doesn't always exist. It exists only when all your eigenvectors are linearly independent. These have to be linearly independent. This is where that linearly independent thing comes in this case. This doesn't always exist. Okay. So yes. So you just take a system which is 1D, which is linear and it's hyperbolic. Because of these properties, you have linearly independent eigenvectors. And since it's strictly hyperbolic, it's possible for us to arrange those eigenvalues in some specific order. And then with that, we are able to, because of these nice properties, we are able to write u vector as some linear combination of eigenvectors itself. Okay. It is your solution u vector can now be written as some linear combination of eigenvectors. That is what is this one. So because of this, you're able to decompose, that is you can split the whole system of equations into p scalar equations. That this is a system of p equations. Now that system has been split up into p independent scalar equations. That is, in each of these independent scalar equations you have just one variable. That is, you only have alpha 1 here. In each of these, that is just dou by dou t alpha 1 plus lambda 1 dou by dou x alpha 1 equals 0. Here you don't have alpha 2 or alpha 3 coming up. In a single equation, you only have alpha 1 and lambda 1. You don't have other things. That is, the system has now been decoupled. That is, initially your system has been coupled with the full matrix A with all the elements present everywhere. That is, matrix A has had elements present everywhere. All of them were non-zero, like not all of them were zero. Okay, we did not have it as a diagonal matrix. But then since we are able to get a diagonal matrix here, we got a diagonal matrix out of A matrix through some decomposition. Because of that, we are able to split the full system of P equations into P independent scalar equations. And then we are solving those P independent scalar equations separately and then trying to get the solution for the whole system of P equations from these solutions of P independent scalar equations. That is, yeah, you have a big system, okay? To say it simply, we have a big system. We just decompose this system into Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah, you have a system of P equations. You decompose that system into P scalar equations. You solve these systems, each of these systems separately. Solve each of these P equations separately. And then you try to get the solution for the full system from these separate equations. Amma! So yeah. Is it clear now? Is this summary okay, or can I give it more elaborately?
Yes, ma'am, I got it. Thank you. That's fine.
Okay. Like you're doing this in, I mean, the requirements for doing this, that is to decompose the system of P equations, you needed this linear independent eigenvectors for this, for A. That is some necessary condition. Without that, you cannot do this decomposition. So this is possible only when you can do eigenvalue decomposition. So even for doing eigenvalue decomposition, you need linearly independent eigenvectors. So only if this is possible, you will be able to decompose your system of P equations into P simple scalar equations. So this is not always possible for any general system of P equations. It's possible when you have some constant A matrix with linearly independent eigenvectors. Next class we'll see what happens if this A matrix is not a constant, because in our physical systems that we encounter, your A matrix is not a constant. A matrix will be a function of U vector. In that case, we'll see how to do this decomposition and how to get this P scalar equations. It's actually we are just transforming the system into simple scalar equations, and then we are finding the solution in that domain, and then we are transferring it back to get the solution for the full system. With this as the tool, that is linear independency of eigenvectors, this becomes the tool for doing this. Yeah. This is a simple Riemann problem. You can connect this with the shock tube problem as well. To the you fix some point. Here we have fixed that it as 0. Like instead of 0, we can fix as some other number, say 1. If you do that, this picture will now become a different. I mean, these points are all concentrated at x equals 0, right? Now instead of that, they'll all be going from here, x equals 1. Now you will have different characteristics going here like this. Now to the left of these you have to find some solution, to the right of these you have to find some other solution. That's what it is. So yeah, this is for only Riemann problem, okay? When you fix some point and to the left of that you have some solution and to the right of that you have a different solution. But in general, your each and every point may have different solution. That is yeah. Here we fixed a point, and to the left we had some one constant solution alpha KL, and to the right we had another constant solution. Like instead of this we can have different constants at different points. So that is a more general problem. Even for that general problem we have stated a solution here. Like because we know, like whatever the solution here, whatever the initial value for u here at each and every point, it will be transformed over this line. It will, you have some alpha k, right, at each and every point in this x-axis, so that will remain the same over this line. So you can always find the solution for alpha k of xt from your initial condition. That will be just this. Your alpha k of xt will be alpha k naught of x minus lambda kt. That is, let's say you're looking at some x comma t, this alpha k of x comma t. Let's say this is your x comma t. So here you want to find what your alpha k will be. So now you trace for this point, you can, through this point one characteristic will pass. Two or more characteristics won't pass because we have linear parallel characteristic. So they are all parallel, they won't intersect. So for sure there is going to be just one characteristic passing through this point. So you trace back. So now since along this line your alpha k remains constant, you trace back to what the value of alpha k was at t equals 0. So now you will have, you at t equals 0, if you go back you will know what alpha k will be. So that is this alpha k of x comma t is now the same alpha k at this point. So that can be now represented as alpha k of x minus lambda k t, right? Because this line is now, well, each of these line has some this dx by dt of this line is lambda k. Okay. So now this point can now be written as x minus lambda k t of comma 0. So that is only written as alpha k naught of x minus lambda kt. So that is your solution. And this actually is obtained from your u naught vector itself as Lk transpose into u naught. That is dot product of Lk with u naught at x minus lambda kt. That will give you alpha k naught of x minus lambda kt. So this is how you find the solution for alpha k at any point x comma t for any general problem. Not just for this specific initial value problem. For any general initial value problem, you have this solution. And this is the solution for this scalar problem, and this is the solution for the bigger system. You just add those all small scalar problems with multiply those solutions for scalar problems with eigenvectors, add them, and then you get the solution for the system. So yeah, is this clear? Any doubts?
Yes, ma'am. Clear.
Okay. So yeah, and I'll start this problem where your matrix will be a function of u vector. We'll start such a problem next class. Even for your Euler's equations, or can I just give some introduction to that? Yeah, this is just some simple thing. Your u vector is the conserved variable vector and g vector is the flux vector. U vector has components. I have written the 1D Euler's equations. So u vector has rho u and rho e, where e is this, and I mean specific total energy. So P by rho into gamma minus 1 plus half Q squared. And this is your flux vector. So I'm writing rho u and rho e as just some u1, u2 and u3. So now your flux vector can be written in terms of u1, u2, u3. That is rho u is just this one, right? This rho u are same. So g1 of u vector is u2. And this is g2 of u vector. And this is g3 of u vector. Okay, we are just trying to write each and everything in terms of just u1, u2 and u3, because to find this A matrix, it is this matrix has this system should now be written as dou by dou u vector of g vector of u vector into dou by dou x of u vector equals 0, right? So this is a matrix. That matrix is this. We need to for finding this matrix, we need to find all these components. That is each of these dou g1 by dou u1, dou g1 by dou u2, and so on. So this is our g1. So dou g1 by dou u1 is 0, dou g1 by dou u2 is 1, and dou g1 by dou u3 is 0. Similarly, we are doing it for the other two as well. I mean, after we'll anyways find this in terms of u1, u2 and u3 only. After that, these will all be found in terms of just these u1, u2 and u3. After that, I've transformed back those things back to the primitive variable form. That is in terms of u. A is the sound speed root gamma p by rho. So now your Euler system of equations can now be written in terms of some general system of conservation laws with some matrix. So now you have some system like this, right? This is the same system that we saw now, except that this matrix is not constant here for the Euler system. This matrix is now a function of u vector, and that matrix is this one. Okay. So for this again, we can try to do, but provided we need to know how to handle it when this matrix is not constant. So this is some motivation for the next class. So any questions? Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am. It's clear.
Okay. So we'll stop it here. We'll meet next class, probably on Saturday or Sunday. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm.